Good morning. Welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and we will also be live streaming this committee meeting, so hi to all the people watching. I would like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media channels. I would also advise all councillors to click on the join meeting in their Broadview on their iPads or computers. I'll start with the opening of the meeting and acknowledgement of traditional owners. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Gibel and Jarawar peoples, and pay respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of the Australia's First Peoples. There's no apologies today, all councillors are present. And are there any declarations of prescribed conflict of interests or declarations of declarable conflict of interest? There's nil been recorded. Are there any from the floor? There are none. I'll take that as none. So we'll move on to the Regional Development Statistics Report, July 2024. The author of this is Jade, who sits to my left, and she will present that report. I'll hand over to Jade.
Good morning, councillors. I'll take the report as read and pass it back to the chair if there's any questions.
Okay, all the councillors have been presented with that report over the last few days. Are there any questions relating to that report? Councillor Shine.
Thank you. Thanks, Jade, for the report. I just have difficulty accessing my material. No wonder it didn't work. Why don't you use it? No, thanks. I'll struggle on without it.
As you can see, the general public, we work as a team here. We all help each other, which is great.
I'm just grateful to Councillor O'Shea for solving a very difficult issue for me. I noticed that that in the pipeline of construction and assessment, there's a large, what would appear to me to be a large number of applications being dealt with at the moment, or lots being dealt with, 2,258. Is that quite high from the point of view of past experiences?
Certainly the team are progressing at the moment with a reasonable number of applications. My understanding is that it is consistent with past number of applications.
Okay, thank you. There is in item 9, and hopefully you might have received an email from me earlier today in relation to the Highfields Pioneer Village. Just as a bit of curiosity, what is the nature of that application there in terms of what building is being sought to be constructed there?
So that's a material change of use for the Highfields Pioneer Village, and the proposal is for a shed to be built for preservation and restoration and storage of historical fire vehicles, with a future intent that will be included in their public display as part of the broader museum at the historical village there at the Pioneer Village Museum at Highfields.
Okay, thank you. And my only other comment was that in relation to items 11 and 12, the graphs, but both numbers, both values and their building approvals are showing an upward trend. Is that correct?
Yes, there's continued growth in building approvals, yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Shine. Councillor Rebecca Vonoff.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, my reading was actually the same as Councillor Shahin's when I saw those numbers, 2,200 and whatever, I think from memory, 230, ish. And that did feel higher than previous reports. And it got me thinking about where we are with some of the lots that are coming on between now and the end of the year. And Jade, apologies that I didn't get this to you on a question or notice. I got a few emails to you last night, but is it the case that we should be expecting by the end of the year some of these larger developments that have been a while in the making, they are coming online, and by sort of the end of December, we will have that uptick in the lots available?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure of the timeline. I can certainly take that on notice and come back to you with some timeframes around our expectations for that.
That'd be great, because anecdotally, that's what it feels like is happening. And we always talk about lag and lead indicators, but casting forward the next few months, it feels like we're going to have that uptick. Thanks, that'd be great.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments in relation to the report? Councillor Bill Cale.
Jade, just on further to Councillor Kerry's question regards the application at the Pioneer Village at Highfields, MCU, can you refresh me please on what the land use code is there? Oh, community use, there, no worries. That obviously covers the whole of that site, community use, and that's always been the case?
Sorry, was your question, what were they doing on the site? Sorry.
No. I'm just wanting to understand why it's a material change of use, because it's community use would be the principal reason, wouldn't it?
I might ask, we've got the manager of planning here. It sounds like your question perhaps is a planning question.
Yeah, it's not as though it's the first shed they've put up over successions of years.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the tables of development assessment, depending on what they're applying for in that zone, dictate whether or not they need a material change of use or whether it's just an accepted development. So in this case, it triggers a code accessible application.
Is that because of the gross floor area of the shed, or is it something particular, or size?
It would just be the use in the zone. I can get some more detail and come back to you on that if you would like, Councillor. I'm not in all the details of this particular application, but I could certainly find that out.
Yeah, no, that'd be much appreciated. I just, there's obviously assessment against the schedules and tables in the planning scheme now, but it does seem this is a community group very focused on what they do, and as I said, there's been a number of buildings they've moved in or large buildings they've erected, sheds over the years, and I just wonder whether those sorts of things would necessarily need to. I'm thinking about the future planning scheme and how we facilitate community groups like this and interest groups in being able to assist them if possible, because obviously material change of use is a higher level of assessment which comes with a higher fee. So, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Cale. Any further questions or comments in relation to the Regional Development Statistics report? If not, I will conclude the meeting. Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry about that. Councillor McMahon is going to move it. Councillor Edwina Farquhar seconded it. All those in favour of that motion? Everyone's in favour? Very good. Thank you. And now I will conclude the meeting for the Regional Development Statistics report. Thank you for your attendance and thanks for viewing online. I'll remind councillors to log out of that, leave that meeting, and then we'll proceed to the next meeting.
Good morning all. Welcome to the Water and Waste Committee meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council. This meeting is open to the public and will be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you who are in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council social media channels. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarrawa peoples, and pay respect to their elders, past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. As I understand it, there are no, everyone is present, so there's no apologies, there's no leave of absence to be given, there's no declaration of prescribed or declarable conflicts of interest. So if we move then on to the agenda, the first item is the temporary storage of Crestbrook Dam releases in Wivenhoe Dam. And I pass over to the General Manager, Mr. Jake Passia, to present that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, councillors. I would normally take this report as read and see questions, but I guess my opening comments around this report is that the storage of water released from Crestbrook Dam is quite a complex issue, and a number of those complexities have not been fully formed yet. So as part of the original resolution from Council to come back to this chamber with a report around this time, I have done the best I can with the time that's been available, and hope that councillors can understand that being such a broad and complex issue, that this will take time in order for the officers to understand and develop a firm position with the assistance of external parties before I feel that a proper, fully formed decision could be made by council about how it wishes to progress in relation to this matter. But I just wanted to put that on the table, and happy to take any questions.
Okay, questions? Yeah, Mayor, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to Jake. Jake, one of the, pardon me, one of the stakeholders that have spoken about through consultations the affected downstream landowners, and noting that you have had some sessions, or at least communication with Somerset in particular, and the landowners along Crestbrook Creek down into Wivenhoe. Can you just provide an update on how that's been progressing from your perspective?
Yes, no, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I can say with those downstream residents is that conversations and communications have been progressing quite positively, understanding that there is a potential substantial impact on some of those downstream residents. Some of the things we've identified through that consultation process has been that there's a number of property accesses, so, you know, basically roads or other access tracks that property owners use that get them off the main road to their actual house of residence that do cross the creek. And so we've had to, through that process, identified some of those impacted landowners that weren't able to be identified as part of the initial desktop review that was done. And generally the community down there has been quite, I suppose, receptive, open and very positive about the approach that we're taking. So we are taking our time. We understand that these matters can be quite delicate, and also irrigators and other users of water. Water, as we know around this table, is a scarce resource. It's highly valued. So we are moving as hastily as we can, but also being respectful of the concerns and considerations of those residents that are downstream of us.
Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Chair, through you. Two parts to my question, Jake, and both of them have to do with our discussions with our friends in Brisbane. The first is that the report on page 4, I believe it is, that talks about the environmental issues and some of the species that have been identified. Now, of course, those species are there when there's flooding, but nature can do things that we can't. So we are working with the state department. And my question on that front is, in your opinion, are those conversations with the state understanding and helpful? And my second part of that question is, we are obviously having to work very closely with Seqwater in all of this. And so, again, what's been the tone of your discussions with Seqwater?
So in relation to the first part of your question around our engagement in the environmental space, the department has been very helpful around understanding that we, even though some of those species can and are affected during significant flood events, that is, however, outside of our control. So when we're talking about releasing water that is within our control, we must do all due diligence to ensure that our impact is managed and not adverse to those creatures. In respect, there's some quite, as the report identifies, some quite sensitive species that everybody is familiar with, and coming into their height of their breeding season, we need to ensure that we're not causing significant harm to those species. So we're trying to work on mitigation measures and approaches that will enable us to commence releasing of maybe some water at volumes that are appropriate, and then look to deal or at least manage increasing those volumes over time. So rather than releasing it all at once, we might start lower and move up. But we still need to work through that. We still need to understand those potential impacts and then discuss with the department. In relation to conversations with Seqwater, they've been very helpful. I guess Seqwater, being the state's bulk water service provider, has quite a mature and well-developed understanding about how they manage their own water security risk to the populations that they have to provide water to. At this stage, the conversation has been quite open. Seqwater is looking for information. They want to know how much water we think is likely to be stored, how long we want to store it for, all of those reasonable questions that I myself might ask if posed the same question by a constituent or upstream, if we were to have upstream dam users that would wanted to store water in our dam, and in fact taken similar approaches to what we are with our colleagues to the south in relation to the storage of water for Southern Downs through the Toowoomba pipeline. So their questions have been quite consistent, reasonable, and so the first part of this exercise I've identified is to conduct some modelling to understand some of those answers to all those questions. We won't get all the answers all at once, but we do need to put some, I guess, if you would, some framework around what are we talking about, how much water is likely to get there, how long are we intending on storing it. As I've identified in the report, SEQ Water manages its storages appropriately to manage the risks associated. They have a lot more control over their dam level than we do. They have a gated system which allows them to take action associated with drawing down or releasing water to enable additional storage for floods, as was done in previous summer years, to ensure that Wivenhoe functions as it's intended to function as a flood mitigation storage for South East Queensland. So I can certainly, nothing that has been put forwards to me by SEQ seem unreasonable or unhelpful. They are open, they are respectful, but I can also understand from their perspective what risks they're attempting to manage and see them as quite reasonable and appropriate given the circumstances that we're talking to them about.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jake. My question, same page, around the bottom dot point there, just around the development of medium and long range weather forecasting. So, Jake, I suppose my question is, like, just reading that and understanding the forecast, understanding obviously the levels that we need to get this dam and then all the other complications that have come with it. Is that reason for concern or a change of tact in regards to, you know, things we've investigated in the past around water releasing, based on that line that, you know, the probability of the dam levels increasing over coming months is greater than the volumes that are able to be released? So I read that and I was a little, you know, concerned. Should I be, or should we be, or is you know, because I mean, we've, right at the start, we sort of spoke about the levels that it needs to get to, and that's just it has to get to that 70% rate, whatever that level is. So, and we spoke about at the time if there was any different measures we could take to try and assist in it getting to that. And we sort of spoke about, well, the amount of water we can release isn't actually going to probably have that big an impact. But now that we've got these figures in front of us of those potential forecasted rainfall figures, does that need to be reconsidered?
Thank you, Councillor James, for the question. I have an opinion in general that this information is used to keep our eyes open. It's a forecast. I'm sure if every weatherman could predict exactly what was going to happen, there'd be some very wealthy weathermen out there. So we use this information to understand the risk. And so what I'm sort of suggesting to councillors through this commentary is that there are matters in relation to this project that are quite complex and unfortunately out of our control, and one of them is the amount of rain that we're likely to get over the next 6, 12, 18, 24 months through the duration of this project. That forecast and the relation to the forecast of this report is to indicate that even if we had commenced and pushed through and run very quickly to release as much water as we possibly could, it's likely that that would have almost negligible effect if we to look forwards and then backwards again in, say, February, March of this year and go, well, I'm glad we pushed hard to get that water released. Now the dams are overflowing again because we've had a really wet summer. So that's to frame the conversation around councillors that the reason the project isn't necessarily, we're moving as fast as we possibly can, but we're not attempting to push through. We're trying to work, we're being collaborative, we're negotiating, as we always do, respectfully with our downstream landowners, because there's just as likely that if we were to commence releasing, that due to factors that are outside of our control, that we'd be in the same situation irrespective of the effort. So I guess just wanting to frame that conversation. The way we mitigate that risk in the project is around the type of contract we've entered into. And I know around this chamber there was a lot of conversations around when we did award the project under an alliance agreement, why an alliance? And there was a very bold statement made by myself about a party and certain components. What I would say is that we have flexibility within our contract. So some of the things we have done on the basis of this forecast and the way the project is progressing is we haven't rushed into construction. So we haven't built up a large construction group. We're still making our way through design. We're ensuring that we're getting our I's dotted and our T's crossed, and ensuring that when we do commence that construction activity, that it's most likely to be at a time that's most convenient for the project. Yes, there are costs that will be incurred by the project as a result of these delays, but they are much lesser than they otherwise would using, for instance, a design and construct type contractual framework where there's hard dates and council needs to do things and things that are not necessarily within council's control. For example, the weather are risks that are generally borne by the owner, by council. But with this alliance contract, we share that risk, and in response to these items, we make changes to the way the project is to be constructed, to the schedule. We can liaise and work collaboratively to solve these problems, which, in the interest of the ratepayer, mean lower costs than otherwise would have been expected. We're not saying that the project budget won't move and change. Risks are risks, but it's about what otherwise would have been experienced if the contractor had construction equipment on site, had people that were ready to go, had a workforce ready to start, and we couldn't start it because the dam level wasn't where it needs to be. So that's how we're managing those overall risks as part of the project. So hopefully that assists in your question, Councillor.
Do you have a follow-up to that?
Councillor James.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jake. Yeah, I understand that. So with everything that's sort of happened or what we've got sort of listed there, so is the level of risk, where the level of risk for this project sits now, how does that differ from what it was? Has it changed from a month, or, forget the exact, time frame of when we last spoke about this and we spoke about the drawdown and all those sorts of things? Because there's all these extra things in here that absolutely need, environmental due diligence and all this. It's extremely important, but time is all, I would always have imagined, I guess, at that point in time when we looked at it then, what the levels were then as to what they could potentially be and things like that. But so is the risk, are you comfortable saying that to us, like the risk level, has it not changed from when we first spoke about this?
So in relation to the entire project, at this point in time, the risk level has not changed. The project's still looking at a $272 million budget. As part of that, we have risks that have reduced in some areas and risks that have increased. So as we've moved through design, we've mitigated some risks, but as you can see here in relation to things that are outside of our control, like the weather, those risks have increased, and the impact that the weather might have on the project has increased. We've also had, and through this project, as councillors are aware, every month I give an update on how the project's progressing. Last year we didn't meet our expenditure targets because the level of effort that the project could put in to achieve what it needed to achieve weren't able to be achieved. And so there are multiple issues that are under close attention by the project board to ensure that they're progressed. So in any large complex project like this, we look at what's called a critical path, and there are multiple activities that are sitting on this critical path, one of which is the drawdown, the other of which is approvals. So we're working to ensure that we're getting those parallel activities that are both critical to ensure that we're completing them in a timely fashion, or at least in a fashion that's as timely as we can reasonably achieve. In relation to the regulator, which I'm sure there'll be some questions around that, Council's well and truly aware of the deadline, or at least the requirement the regulator's placed for this project to be substantially completed by October of next year. We've started conversations with the regulator around timing of this project, and as any good regulator forms an opinion on the basis of effort, as well as what things are within and out of our control. So Chris Nielsen has been very open to the fact that as long as council continues to make progress and good progress on this project, on matters that it can control, he is not going to consider adverse reactions in relation to imposing fines or other penalties to council as a result of things that are outside of our control, and for instance weather would be one of those activities.
Thanks Jake, thanks Chair, and appreciate your leadership and professionalism with this, not only obviously dealing with or keeping everyone else up to date, but on all different parties. So thanks, Chair.
Just before I go on, just on that same dot point, just as a small matter, the Speedbird Climate people have done a forecast of for August. Is that August just gone, or August next year?
That'll be August just gone. So the writing of this report, since writing and finalising this report, I've received another monthly update. So we get a forecast every month for the months forwards. Like I said, it's a medium-term forecast, predominantly looking at the next 3 months, just so that we can have an indication of what risks we need to manage. And so that indication is from August, September, October. I received one in the start of September that'll do September, October, November, and those distributions of probabilities haven't substantially changed. So they've modified within a couple of percent, but they're generally inclined that events of 100 millimetres are going to be probabilistically the most likely type of events we're going to see over this next 3-month period, if we do in fact see events.
How accurate were they for August?
In the fact that we didn't receive almost any rainfall in August. We saw a little bit at the start of August, as I said, slightly above the 50th percentile median for what we see in council. So I'd say as far as forecasts go, I would go out and buy some lotto tickets based on it, councillors, but I certainly think that they're taking quite a professional approach and giving us a level of resolution that is a little bit better than, say, what the Bureau of Meteorology and others do, so that we can, again, make informed decisions about what's most probabilistically likely to occur.
Thank you. Councillor Tim.
Thanks, Chair. Good morning, Jake. I do have a question, but can I just say I very much admire your patience and persistence and ongoing work. We have a dam wall that we may not necessarily want, that is financially hamstringing us for a while and doesn't give us any more capacity. We have to drain the dam to 70% to build it, which we don't necessarily want. And to do that, we have to tip the water down the hill, and now it's providing extremely hard to tip the water down the hill. And when I read this last night, I was, so we all guns blazing go down the hill. It goes along for a while. It hits Crestbrook Creek. There's 54 Ks. Some irrigators have a share, some natural seepage, those kind of things, and then it hits Crestbrook. But then there's a point here, and it does go to your conversation with Councillor Bonhoff, that there may not be a willingness from Seqwater to want it, and that's the first point under the consideration for storage of released water. Now, you're saying with that conversation that they're otherwise respectful and the conversations are good, but that point of their willingness and their feasibility studies to actually take our water was of a little bit of concern to me. Like, we're literally giving you free water that we might pump up at our own cost another time. But can I just have a conversation on that willingness and feasibility with Seqwater to store it?
Sure, Councillor, and thank you very much for your kind words at the start and from Councillor James's kind words. What I would say is I am one member of a very big team that helps make sure that we are addressing all matters associated with the project, and this is a very challenging project and very complex, but we have a great team of people who support me in ensuring that we give Council the best information possible. In relation to the conversation around willingness from SEQ Water, Ivanhoe Dam will store our water. The conversation becomes a case of why, to some extent, will Seqwater store our water? Will they hold it for us? Is it our water in the first instance? We've released it down the hill. There's a conversation around entitlement. It's similar to, an analogy I try to use, which isn't the best, but it's similar to a party at a birth, someone's party and a birthday cake. Your mum might bake the cake for you. It's certainly your cake, but are you entitled to the whole thing, or are you entitled to your slice because there's a whole bunch of other people around? So yes, while we're giving part of our water, essentially, or seeing the water that would be stored behind our dam, the regulation and the legislation currently doesn't contemplate the idea of entitlement to retrieve that water. We already have an existing arrangement commercially available to us with Seqwater that we have entitlement to water under a contract. If Seqwater were to allow us to store this water that's questionable as far as entitlement goes, and that's the question that needs to be answered. As I said, it's not a questionable entitlement as to whether it's our water. It's just legislatively we need to get clarity on our entitlement to retrieve that water. And then, as I said earlier, with SEQ Water, to store it for a period of time. Now, we're not sure just yet how long, and we need to investigate how long we would need to store that water, just how much water we would be storing. And then let's just say if that water was to go over 1, 2, 3 summers, as a construction project occurs, council then makes a decision as to whether or not it wants to pump it up or needs to pump it up. SEQ Water has to manage its storage volumes through that process, so they also are under the same climatic condition and events that we have. They have to manage their dam, they have to make sure that there's capacity for oncoming floods. As they did last year, I think they took a bold decision to lower the storage to a couple of percent, or at least to 80%, to accommodate a large flood event, of which didn't eventuate. So our water, our piece of cake that we might give to one of our best mates to look after it for a little while, might get hungry and that bit of cake might disappear, or, those sort of conversations. So Seqwater hasn't said no, but in the conversations I've had with them, they've been quite open, they've been quite honest and very respectful. And as I said, as a manager of a bulk water authority myself, we too are faced with the same questions around how do we potentially store SDRC's water as part of the Toowoomba to Warwick pipeline, and I'm adopting a very similar approach in relation to those conversations. Water security is paramount to this community, just as much as water security is paramount for SEQ Water and the broader South East Queensland. So we are respectful. I'm hopeful that we can at least have reasonable conversations and start those conversations and provide some evidence and some information, but it will be unreasonable for council to expect that if we do have entitlement to water stored in Ivanhoe, that water will be at SEQ Water's risk. That risk will be borne by this council around what happens with that water. And that's where I said at the start, there's a number of complex issues that need to be brought back to this, worked through and brought back to this council about how that risk is allocated, because it would be unreasonable, I believe, to expect that someone would hold our piece of birthday cake until the next birthday, or in fact the birthday after. So we need to be cognizant of that and expect that if they were to hold it for that long, that birthday cake would be in the same pristine condition under which we gave it to them.
Great analogy. Thanks, Jake.
Councillor Bill?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, Jake, in fact, some of my questions have been answered, but I think simply to say that I think we need to approach this with a very open mind, given the amount of variables on the scenario that we're talking about here, storing our water, and in fact, if we have access to that. But you're right. I mean, it comes with a degree of risk. It rains, they have to manage their dam. So there's a degree of risk around if we get to the scenario of storage. So I think we have to think about the tipping point at when it becomes impractical to enter into an arrangement with potentially a high degree of risk, or we look at another scenario and we pump water when we use it, when we need it. So either way, I see us as we have to progress with this project. So I think we need to approach it with a degree of open-mindedness and look at what is financially practical for this council and best for this community, given the large amount of variables over what happens with that water.
I can only agree with you, Councillor Bill, and we will take that approach, hence why I've said we're not racing, and the comments and the context of the report is written that we will investigate, continue to investigate while it is both economically viable and practically viable to investigate this. And if it becomes apparent that it's neither practically viable or economically viable, because it may cost us almost as much to go through this process to get agreement, and that the risks to then that would otherwise be with this water, then to accept and rely on the existing arrangement we have with SEQ around procurement of water that's already in Ivanhoe.
Just if I may, Chair. Jake, I know it's a broad question, but do we have some idea of timing around when those discussions have progressed to a point where you'd be able to come back to council and say, look, solution A is not practical, solution B or otherwise?
No, to be completely honest. Some of the things some of the key milestones I'm looking towards the preparation of some modelling that I've indicated in this report to see just how much volume is likely to go to be able to be stored. We would then have to commence releasing of water, get some measurements and checks and ensure that we validate that model, because a model's only as good as the inputs that you put into it, and we need to understand that to some degree. And then also some preliminary conversations with both lawyers and SEQ around exactly what's not contemplated in the Water Act, which is entitlement of water that's been released from one dam to then be stored into another, and council's ability to be entitled to that water, which is what we're talking about. We're not saying it's ownership, it's about entitlement to access that water that has been released as a result of a safety concern to manage the storage level. But that said, councillors, we are extracting, as we have said. The releasing of water is only one component of the storage management processes. We have and still have bores off. We are continuing to pump as much water as we can out of Crestbrook, and we are seeing levels decrease depending on the rainfall that occurs. So we are seeing levels decrease. And as I said, the water level in Crestbrook is one of those items that's on the critical path. It's not the only item, and we're consistently tracking our ability to deliver the project in relation to those critical path items.
Thanks, Jake. Thanks, Chair.
Any further questions? Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair, through to Jake, obviously we have had some quite warmer weather as well, starting to cool off a bit now, so evaporation, I'd assume, would play a little bit of a role, and the net result of water in, water out would come through next week, probably in your monthly report. It just occurs to me that we are, obviously, as you do with these projects, you discover some of the unknowns, and one of those obviously is around the environmental part of it. It might be worthwhile you considering the Resilient Rivers, Councillor Mayor's SEQ, as a potential funding partner for some of that work through the city deals with the federal, state and local government. We've got a meeting only on Friday this week, so perhaps we might be able to have a thought about what that is. This report will certainly help me to raise it at that point. I have had discussions as of last Friday with when other councillors were at the Councillor Mayor's SEQ Local Government Forum in Brisbane with the Somerset Mayor and CEO about that same subject, and there's a willingness for them to partner with us in some way, shape or form, because effectively if we do this right, it can actually be a positive for the Resilient Rivers project getting into Ivanhoe. So can I just flag that with you as something worthy of consideration?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, Mr. Mayor. It's a fantastic opportunity, and we are aware of it as a project, and we're working very closely, as you said, with our colleagues in Somerset to understand what may best benefit that, the Crestbrook Creek scheme. Also working closely with the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries around the fish passage and other offsets that can occur to better allow fish to transit through that healthy waterway network. So absolutely, there are some very close alignments with that funding source, as you said, and we're very much working on what that can look like to provide a full briefing to yourself to assist in those conversations.
No further questions? Jake, General Manager, is it fair to say that you're raising the possibility that it may not be feasible financially to seek to get the water back at some stage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would be remiss in my role if I did not alert councils to the fact that not just for financial feasibility, but the amount of water that may actually be able to be stored in Ivanhoe might be considerably lower than the amount we release, which would then mean that the effort or time and or costs that is expended by the organisation to see it returned to see that entitlement guaranteed to then only have to pay for the electricity costs to return it rather than the actual water costs might be a little bit higher than the value that's retained by the customer and the community. So I guess I just wanted to ensure that was part of the full picture, so council is aware that like a lot of opportunities, not all of them sometimes materialise in the gain in which was originally expected.
Clear rising. Okay. The motion then is that the report be noted and that council be updated on further progress on the temporary storage of Crestbrook Dam releases in Ivanhoe Dam in the monthly water and waste group report. Councillor Bill and Deputy Mayor, Councillor Rebecca von Hoff. Any debate? All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. The next item is the Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project Advocacy Plan. Just bear with me, but if we are to discuss the attachment, we will go into confidential, but if not, we can proceed, if that's the wish of council, to not discuss that, but to proceed according to the report, which I'll ask Jake to deliver that report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess in opening statements for this report, Council, I'd like to acknowledge Trevor Mitchell, who has put considerable amount of time as the principal stakeholder engagement in trying to assist me in writing and drafting this report, but also is taking the lead in most of the stakeholder engagements for the project. I'd also like to acknowledge Brendan Steinhardt and Michael Duff, who are in the room, who've also formed part of the Dam Safety Advocacy Group. So that's the group that meets on a fairly regular basis to try and understand, identify opportunities for advocacy for the project. So this report and the work that has been conducted to date around advocacy for the dam safety project couldn't be possible without the hard work for those people. So I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
Any questions? So half a question.
I realise we'll probably have to go on a confidential, but I do have a question regarding advocacy. I just probably feel it might be beneficial for council to have a quick conversation about one of those items.
So you're proposing we go into confidential, basically? Yeah. Okay.
If my colleagues are open to that.
Okay. Councillor Von Hoff.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to Councillor Carl, I would ask, is it in regard to the officers' attachment? Because there's the officers' advocacy and then there's the political advocacy. We can talk about the political advocacy in open session, but if it is in regard to the specifics of that attachment...
No, well, then perhaps we can do it in open if it's just about the political
we
advocacy.
remain open, okay? Yeah. Councillor Bill, do you want to speak to it at this stage?
Just let me find it here.
We might go to the Mayor in the meantime.
Yeah, no, they do that.
Yeah,
Thanks, Chair.
okay.
Oh, look, I'm just wondering when this report was first written, if I could, Chair, through you.
This report was first drafted early August, so within the first 2 weeks of August, and it's been through some revisions through the process. So the date I think Trev finalised it for me was within the first 7 days of August, and there's been some revisions and modifications attempting to, based on some announcements that have been made since then, but the report was not holistically rewritten to try and accommodate those announcements.
Yeah, sure. I guess through you, Chair, through to Jake, in regard to, there's only two areas so far that we've sought funding. One is through disaster recovery funding through the federal government, of which we've been unsuccessful, and Jake, you might be able to talk to that. And the second of which is the significant funding sought from the state government, of which there's a business case and request gone in to the government. It's now, Jake, in your report, says that it's in now with Treasury, and that goes through its process of working through that. I guess from a sheer, and this is just a comment, from an advocacy piece, Jake, perhaps if you comment on those two elements, just to give us an update on where we're at, noting that we don't provide a monthly update necessarily on advocacy for this. This is our chance to ask those questions. So if you could just give us an update on both those.
Absolutely. If I may, through the Chair. Thank you, Mr Mayor, for the question. In relation to the Disaster Ready Fund and Council's application, Council applied for $20 million of federal funding through that fund as a 50-50 share, as you would. So Council was to contribute $20 million to matched with the federal government's $20 million for the $40 million component of the Dam Safety Improvement Program, which is the spillway widening. That particular activity provides the greatest amount of flood resilience and has the greatest impact on risk reduction for the project. Unfortunately, Council was not successful in its application for funding for that particular program. As a result, I've got some figures here which I did provide to councillors early today, but for Queensland, 29 projects under that fund were successful, with the total funding provided to Queensland by the Disaster Ready Fund by the federal government of $30.8 million, of which the average project was around $1.06 million. And the largest project of which, rightly so, is quite a very beneficial project to the community of Douglas in Wujal, which was for a grant of almost $11.8 million of funding to provide a battery backup and power backup and solar for their microgrid for that community, because based on the information I have, the community regularly goes without power during extreme events. So I think based on conversations, I have requested formal feedback from both the QRA, that's the Queensland authority that administers that funding application on behalf of the state, and also the federal department as well. I've received some informal feedback from the state suggesting that our application was quite a strong application. We met all the requirements, so it wasn't an administrative oversight or other oversight that was detrimental to our application. But they did mention that the program was incredibly well subscribed, in fact oversubscribed, and the funding, there was a number of fantastic community opportunities and broad benefits that were across the entire state, that the QRA certainly ranked our application amongst the higher end of the applications, but at this stage the federal government chose that to distribute the funds as they have, and we haven't received any formal feedback yet. But although it is quite disappointing that council wasn't successful in this particular endeavour, we will continue to attempt to identify other endeavours as we can as officers to put the project forwards to garner funding. In relation to the business case, Mr Mayor, I have a copy with me here. It was provided to the Premier on the 4th of July this year, and thank you, Mr Mayor, for making your time available to hand that over. To date, as I said at the time of the writing of this report, we were working closely with Treasury to provide information. So they have, the Queensland Government and certainly multiple departments have read our business case and are reviewing our business case. We had a number of information requests in relation to our financial capacity and capability and the impacts that this project has had on not just the water and waste team, but also our entire community and those projects which are of great importance to our community and how they've been impacted. With our response to those information requests provided in sections, so as information was generated, we provided it back to the state as quickly as possible, with the last information provided to the state on around the 20th of August. So we've answered all the questions, and at this point in time it's currently with various departments to provide briefings and essentially allow the state to make an informed decision about our business case.
Thanks, Jake, for the update. Just observation, and thank you for circulating the disaster ready funding. Those that were successful, it'd be interesting to also know those that weren't successful as well. I don't know if that's been made available. Just an observation though, you know, the average grant was just over $1 million. So I just wonder then, and you'll get feedback through, obviously our request was for $20 million, which was significant in the scheme of things, and there was no guideline to suggest you couldn't do that. In history would say that something of that size has been funded in the past, so there's no rhyme nor reason, it doesn't seem. It would be interesting though from the feedback as to when the next round is made available, because it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you can't have started the project, and you can't start the project, or a project that's commenced is ineligible. It's probably a better way to put it, and therefore that puts some pressure on us as to what would be suitable. And looking through all of the other grants that have been received, admirable, you probably couldn't argue with them. One could say that ours may well have ranked higher, but the sheer quantum of ours probably made it very difficult to do that. So just a bit of feedback from you, if you wouldn't mind, in regard to that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You are in fact correct that a project that has commenced activities, so construction activities, is not eligible under the QRF, under the this fund under the DRO Disaster Ready Fund. Round 3 is and we're keeping an eye on when round 3 is to be open, and we'll be looking at our program to ensure that we might identify other projects or components of the Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Program, projects that could be aligned and beneficial that may not have yet started construction at the time that that round is open. So we will continue to monitor and keep our eyes open. But at that stage, it's also a difficult decision. We're not actively delaying the project either. I don't want the community to feel that we're delaying the project in order to, try and go or make it more appealing for a grant. We are moving and progressing as quickly as we can in light of a number of different activities and risks. So this is just one of those considerations that we make, but it's not having a driving factor on the project. It is where it can fit and align, we will do our best to ensure it does.
I have a number of councillors to ask questions, but was that your question relevant? No. The next one is Councillor Bill.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, in fact, on that page that's on the screen under issues and responses, my question is, Jake, in the last paragraph, if Council's current funding submissions are unsuccessful, Council may wish to consider hiring a professional lobbyist to engage state and federal governments, initiate a media marketing campaign to exert political pressure and boost grassroots support for external funding. No advocacy budget exists. Jake, do we have any, has there been any moves by your department to investigate what a likely cost would be for a lobbyist? I guess the background to my question, or the reasoning for my question, is we have a serious affordability issue for our community moving forward if we're unsuccessful for funding. So it's a balance between, have we done everything possibly that we can? I'm not throwing the towel in yet, but a professional lobbyist is hired for a particular reason and a particular outcome. It doesn't always guarantee you, but it can hedge your bets a bit better sometimes. So, the likelihood of us, well, not the likelihood, the very reality is we will push projects out that would normally have been completed in financial years, in capital works programs and all sorts of things to afford this. So my question is, should we and have we got any idea of preliminary costs? There's a time to get, roll the sleeves up, and we can play gentlemanly and politely for so long. Is there an avenue for this?
Thank you, Councillor. I'll do my best to answer that question. In response to should we, that's a discussion for Council to make and a decision for Council to make. It would be inappropriate for officers in my department to seek to engage in that political space. In relation to have we? No, we haven't, because as I said in the first instance, I haven't received indication from the chamber that they wish to proceed in this direction, as it is very much a political space that is not suitable for officers to be engaging in. So we've left that rather to the Mayor's office to provide direction in that respect.
Yeah. No, look, I probably didn't put that suitably. I realise that that's not an officer's position. I'm proposing a question to the boardroom, I guess, in this forum. Where to from here? Should we be investigating, colleagues, and exhausting all avenues open to us, rather than have a gap if we're unsuccessful? Should we be doing some preliminary investigations around costings and that? I guess that's a question to my colleagues. It's a suitable forum to raise it.
Councillor James.
Thanks, Councillor Kerry. It's probably not on the exact same path, but a similar sort of thing. I think I understand everything that's in this report and the recommendation and why we're doing it, and I think we're doing a really good job in the advocacy in this space. And I suppose my comment or thought bubble or pondering is this an opportunity where we actually, and this is a question I suppose around the table, and I think Deputy Mayor Von Hoff's obviously had a fair bit in regards to this, so she might be best to speak about it. But I think around, we've talked about, it impacts communities, so is it around do we need to have, is it more like there should be another point to this recommendation, essentially around a further discussion or workshop or whatever it may be around other advocacy avenues? Because I just sort of feel like, if we want to get the public on board with their support, if it's media, we've talked about petitions, we've talked about webs, or I think we've got to think bigger, and in terms of, this is the hardest thing for our community to get a grasp of at the moment, and this may be an opportunity to get them really on the journey with us. If people think their pothole's not fixed, they think, is it because of the dam wall? If their lawn's not getting mowed, if they've got an issue, that's, just to try and give it a bit of relativity. But so I suppose, sorry, Chair, I probably don't really have a question, but I think that's something we should give serious consideration to and thought to. Okay, yep, this recommendation as it sits, I think, is perfect as to what it is, but do we need to, start this process now of saying, all right, what else? I'll leave it at that.
No, thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I think to Councillor O'Shea's point, the best advocacy is the advocacy that no one ever actually even knows about. That's in the ideal world. The public never even has to know about it. In that wonderful fantasy land, that's how it should work. And with advocacy, there's different steps. And you never hope that you have to get to those top tiers. But we are also realists. And as we go through the process, we can hand on heart say that we have done an approach, and if that has been exhausted, it is time to shift to the next gear. And that's probably where we are with this, because we've got the caretaker mode for state government is October 1st, which gives us about 3 weeks to have a good understanding about whether the state government, as a result of the business case and all of the conversations that we've had, are going to make a commitment for funding, and then we enter the election period. Now, if the polling is to be believed, it's likely that there's going to be a change of government. So the first thing to say, I think, is that I agree with what you're saying, Councillor James, and if we can give some mind to how we might add to this, because there is, as I said at the start, there's the officers' advocacy and then there's the political advocacy. And I thank so much for all of the work that the officers are doing on this. So we go into caretaker October 1st. At a local government association of Queensland level, there's also lots that is happening. And next week there is a meeting, because we're not alone in this. We are one of 13 local government areas that are caught up in this. And amongst that group, there's Gladstone, there's Cairns, City of Ipswich, Logan, Mackay, Charters Towers, Cloncurry. It's across the state. So that LGAQ meeting is happening next week, just in time for the state election. And then separate to that, I think that as these projects get closer to that 2025 deadline, and then the 2035 deadline, we are knowing more about what's happening. And I think that there is a real fairness piece and a real fairness question to this. So South East Queensland, and we've talked in the last item about Seqwater, but Seqwater is the Queensland Government Bulk Water Supply Authority. They are also caught up in this legislation. They have dams that they need to upgrade so that they are compliant with this legislation. And the ballpark cost for that is somewhere in the order of a mind-boggling $6 billion. $6 billion. They're huge dams that need to be upgraded. And the fairness question is, because that SEC Water is the Queensland Government Bulk Water Supply Authority, taxpayers are going to be paying for that $6 billion. So the Mayor, me, the Chair, CEO, General Manager, Passier, everybody in this room as taxpayers will be subsidising the upgrades of those dams for South East Queensland to drink from. Now, then the question becomes, are those taxpayers in South East Queensland who are drinking that water, are they also paying for ours? And at the moment, until we get a state government commitment, the answer is no. So the fairness question then becomes, is it fair for the ratepayers of Toowoomba region and the ratepayers of Gladstone and the ratepayers of Mackay and Ipswich and Cairns to pay twice? And as we get into the election period, this is going to be something that I think that becomes a question not just for us, but for the entire state. So those are just some comments, Chair, and I completely support the addition of some words here that would enable the officers, while the political work continues, but allows the officers to go from the current step to the next step with the advocacy.
Thank you. Very, very well put. Councillor Minister, did you indicate before?
No, my question's been answered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bill?
So I go back to my question about the proposition of engaging, thanks, Councillor Rebecca, talking about going to the next step. Should we be putting an addition to the recommendation that Council investigates the likely costs and options for engagement of a professional lobbyist? I'm open to, I just think that and thanks, Councillor Rebecca, you put it very well, we are not the only fish in the pond here. And you said pay twice, well, double dipped. Anything outside of SEQ corner, let's call it, that's what it appears to be like. So, you know, we're up against some, where, as you say, we're not unique. So do we actually give the officers enough head of steam here to go, well, let's go and do a bit of homework on what it looks like to engage a lobbyist?
Mayor, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, thanks, Councillor Rebecca. Thanks, Councillor Bill, for your comments. I think you want to keep this a bit broader than that, to be honest. I think it's just simply council workshop, additional advocacy for the Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project, as to increase our chances for funding to support the community, and not preempting what that may be. I think Councillor Rebecca's hit on the most important piece here, which is around the fairness of this across the state, and this is where LGAQ have really lent in on this. It's a big task. No level of government's got money. So let's be realistic about this, right? Our financial management over the last decade and longer has enabled us to be in a position where we're actually needing to push projects out now because we can't fit it under our financial sustainability. That's what we're doing, pushing them out. You think about that for those other areas which have a smaller rate base than what we have. So it's a bigger play here, and that's where this needs to take its course. put yourselves in the feet of the minister at the moment and of the state government with what will be, a $6 billion plus for their own waters. So we need to be realistic about this. I'm comfortable with the motion. I'm comfortable about workshopping the second phase of it. But I would suggest to you, and say this in all honesty, we have yet to be unsuccessful in our application to the state government. This is a big decision for the state government on how they do this. We've worked hand in glove. Officers have worked hand in glove. Politically, we've done, and Councillor Rebecca, behind the scenes work. That's all part of this process. So we find ourselves where we are at the moment. Let's not lose sight of the fact that we need to do the job. We will get it done. We need support from the state government. This is an enormous task for those that are involved. It is a big task. So the second part of the motion will be able to enact if or when that is required. And I'd suggest it will. If it's not for this project, I would suggest for its many other projects, whether that's in water or whether it's in any other parts of our infrastructure that we need. So it's a broader discussion that we can have, but for this one, more than happy with that motion. Beg your pardon, James? Council workshop, continue advocacy to investigate the likely cost. No, that's not part of it. Council workshop, additional advocacy opportunities to enhance the likelihood of funding to support our community. That's fine, Councillor Carey. Additional funding to alleviate the financial burden for our community of the Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project. You're doing a great job working this through as we're here, to be honest. So maybe just after advocacy, just put opportunities. And if that's, I'm happy for that to move that if that's the case. If councillors are of the mind. I beg your pardon? 1 and 2, yeah.
Well, as appears on the screen, I think it's 1 and 2. Yeah, sure. Councillor Tim.
We were talking about a lobbyist. I just wanted to ask Councillor Rebecca, your timelines are very similar to what I'm working to. The caretaker is starting next month, and we're on the 10th of September. I suppose, and I know we've moved away from a lobbyist, but I don't have any objection to that at all, Bill, but is it going to do anything at this point? 2 weeks, 3 weeks from caretaker?
I think it's after the caretaker, it's the election, and then it's after the election period. That's the important part.
No, thanks. Councillor Trevor.
I totally endorse Deputy Mayor Rebecca's comments. Ratepayers, taxpayers will be double dipping, or some of them will be. Each of us, every one of us viewing in here, next time you see a Member of Parliament, talk to them about it, make them fully aware of it. Yes, we've got a limited time, But if they keep hearing the same message, no matter it's from TRC, whether it's from Gladstone, Cairns, whatever, and go along with that, they must get the message. So whoever gets in, they will have the message from every regional council in Queensland who are affected by this. It's 6 billion plus all the other regional centres, so it's going to be a lot of money, and I can see why they're stalling. So if we go into caretaker mode, can the Treasury make a decision between that and the election? No, I would presume. So we've got 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks to get a answer. Would that be correct, Jake, or on your understanding? Or
If I may, Mr Chair, thank you, Councillor. I think what's important here is something the Mayor's already mentioned, is that we're yet to hear the result of our business case. Now, our business case, in my opinion, stands as a good reason and outlines why this project should be funded by any state government, not just, you know, irrespective of ideology, by a state government for this community. So as to whether the current state government or whatever happens post an election, I think the business case still stands, and until we get a decision from the state government about our business case, it would be improper to assume how long that process may take.
because it could run into the next term of a government, whoever that may be. Yeah, but as you said, it's an excellent business case, and as you said, it does stack up and makes common sense.
That's correct. So, as I said, it's up to this chamber. I think as far as timing for workshops and those things, I can work with the Mayor's office and councillors around finding an appropriate time and venue and location to have said workshop as a matter of priority. And we can take that from there as far as advocacy. The project will continue irrespective of outcomes from respective elections. And we need to, you know, from an officer level, we'll do our best to support the chamber as well as those of our opposite number in William Street at EDs and respective government heads, departmental heads, to ensure that the information that's provided, as I said in the business case, does stack up and make sense.
Councillor Brunner.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Jake. And Jake, thank you for all of the advocacy you and your team have done so far, and to the Mayor and Deputy Mayor for their advocacy so far, and definitely support and endorse what Councillor Rebecca has just said about, as Councillor Trevor said, with the double dipping. Do we, as far as business cases go, is there normally an approximate timeline that these take to go through? Do we have a rough, I mean, I know there's no date. Do they normally take 2 months, 3 months, or does it all just totally depend on the business case for an approval or decline?
Perhaps if I'm probably not the best person to attempt to answer this question, but in my limited experience, it does depend on the project. It does depend on the quantum of funding. It also depends on the amount of information that's been contained within the business case. Councillor Shine may be able to, the chair may be able to shed more light as a member of decision making in previous governments as to how long might be reasonable for council to anticipate a decision.
No, I've no real idea, but just if one side of politics comes out, then the other will follow suit pretty soon after that, you would think. The difficulty here is the fairness aspect. On one hand, we've budgeted for these improvements and we've put out other projects for years beyond as a result, but other smaller councils just won't, no point in budgeting for it, they haven't got the money for it, and if the government were to help those but not us, it would be inconsistent. So it would be a difficult, quite apart from affording it, it would be difficulty for whatever government we end up with after the 26th of October. No, sorry, I can't answer the question. I think wrap it up. Councillor Gary, had your hand up before? No, okay. If not, we might move to conclusion and ask that somebody move that council continues to advocate for external funding for the Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project and to highlight the impact of the project on the region's ratepayers and the council's ability to deliver projects and services. And 2, council workshop additional advocacy opportunities to enhance the likelihood of additional funding to alleviate the financial burden for our community of the Crestbrook Dam Safety Improvement Project. I have a mover for that motion. That's the Mayor, I think, and the Deputy Mayor has seconded. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you. That concludes the meeting. Thank you for your attendance.
Okay, councillors, will you take your seats, please? Thank you. Right, ladies? Thank you. Right. Good morning and welcome to the Infrastructure Committee meeting of the Toowoomba Regional Council. The meeting's open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank all of you, those of you in the room who are with us today, and acknowledge everyone watching via Council's social media. I'd like to welcome the CEO Brian Pidgeon, General Manager Mike Brady, Rodney Betts, Transport and Drainage Planning, and Avril Campbell, who's Principal of Drainage Planning, as well as Wendy and Deanne. Welcome, Deanne. I don't think I've met you yet. So I'd like to open the meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse the lands we meet, the Western Waka Waka, the Guyabal and the Jadawa people, as well as the Bigambal Nation who have land rights to the west of our regional council area. And I pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold their knowledge, the rich traditions and the bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. We have everyone in attendance today. There's no leave of absence required. You can only do that at an ordinary meeting anyway, or a special meeting. I have no declarations of prescribed conflict of interest or declarable conflict of interest, but should one arise, please bring it to my attention. We have one item on the infrastructure agenda for today, and that is a soil conservation matters at Wrights Road, Gary Little Plain, and it's a confidential meeting. So the reason for the confidential meeting is this report and attachments discuss matters relating to business for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government, and contains information that potentially identifies individuals. Therefore, it is recommended that the meeting be closed to the public in accordance with sections 254J, 3C, the local government's budget, E, legal advice obtained by the local government or legal proceedings involving the local government, including, for example, leading proceedings that may be taken by or against the local government, and G, negotiations relating to a commercial matter involving the local government for which a public discussion would be likely to prejudice the interests of the local government, of Local Government Regulation 2012. Can I have someone move that we go into a closed session, please? Moved Councillor Shine, seconded the Mayor. Those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Yeah, interesting. So councillors, the recommended motion is that council note the Department of Resources and the parties involved are working towards delivery of soil conservation remedial works for the unformed, currently not maintained section of Wrights Road, Gary Little Plain. 2, that council fund the necessary works within the road reserve from 24-25 lower order roads program. 3, that the section of Wrights Road Reserve, Gary Little Plain remain as unformed, however, maintained in Council's road register. And 4, Council note that the Department of Resources is also working towards the delivery of soil conservation remedial works with the adjoining landowners above and below the Wrights Road Reserve, Gary Little Plain. Can I have a mover, please? Moved Councillor Gary, seconded Councillor Trevor. We really can't go into any debate on this, so I'll put the motion. Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you. The motion's carried. Thank you. And that ends the Infrastructure Committee meeting for September. Thank you. Sorry. Sorry. I saw a hand. I do apologise. Councillor Tim, I do apologise. I honestly just saw a hand and I couldn't see Kerry, so I do apologise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Thanks.